But now let me turn to Professor Shankari Sundaraman. She, of course, is a professor of at the Center for Indo-Pacific Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Uh, she has 28 years of experience in research and teaching, and currently serves at the Center of Indo-Pacific Studies within the School of International Studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University. Her areas of interest include Southeast Asia, Southwest Pacific Studies with a specialization in Southeast Asian Studies. She was awarded the prestigious Asia Fellows Award 2005-2006 by the Ford Foundation and conducted research as a visiting fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Jakarta. Yeah. Focusing on the effects of globalization on plural societies. Yeah, I'm very glad to hear that. And this being a case study of Indonesia. Dr. Shankari's international collaborations include a joint research grant from the Asian Scholarship Foundation with Professor Uttara Sahasrabuddhe on India-Indonesia, global powers and regional politics in 2009, and a fellowship at the Asia Pacific College of Diplomacy at the Australian National University, Canberra, in 2005. Her key publications include articles like Research Institutes as Diplomatic Actors, RIS, please listen, and works in strategic analysis on topics such as post-financial crisis Indonesia, East Timor, Kashmir, Myanmar's political continuity, and Cambodia's post-UNTAC scenario. Professor Sundaram, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. At the outset, am I on? Yes, thank you. At the outset, a very warm thank you to the RIS, Professor Chaturvedi, Professor Prabir, and Pankaj for asking me to join this. I think I'm very happy to know about this panel, especially because of an historical evaluation. Because what I think is very significant is, I think it's already been mentioned by the chair of the session, as well as Ibu Ina and Ambassador Gurjeet, that the kind of plurality and diversity that we see in Indonesia is actually a mirror image of what we see in India. So that itself, I think there is a great potential for these two countries to sort of interact on various levels. And looking at the historical context actually becomes relevant because, to my mind, you can divide this historical context into 5 very significant phases, because 75 years, if you divide it into roughly about 15 years each or a decade and a half, you actually see the transition that has shaped both India as well as Indonesia, not just at the bilateral level, but also at the regional levels. The first phase, I would say, is a very distinct phase of the decolonization period. I think there's been a mention about it, both from the chairperson, Ambassador Saran, as well as others who spoke in the morning, that we're looking at this kind of a commonality as to where India stood vis-a-vis Indonesia during the time of the decolonization phase. If you look at the decolonization phase per se, you see an extremely high degree of momentum among the states that came together at that time. And there's a very interesting quote from Nehru, which is there in Professor V. Suryanarayan's book, where he says that you cannot have half a free world and half the world enslaved in colonization. And it's interesting because India's claims, Nehru's statement was that India would not stop merely with its own independence, but would put its energy and its efforts into ensuring that the success of freedom struggles, not just in Indonesia, but in Malaysia, would also be taking place, where India would have a critical role to play. Now, it is this kind of, I would say, the kind of convergence that you see here that is actually quite interesting, because Indonesia, which went through 4 years of what you call the revolutionary years between 1945 to 1949, that crucial period in the revolutionary years was a freedom struggle that India supported wholeheartedly. The 1949 conference that India organized was just a few months before Indonesia actually becomes independent in August of 1949. This, I would say, is the backdrop to the Bandung Conference and how the Bandung Conference sort of evolves from there. Now, Ambassador Gurjeet made a very interesting reference, which I would like to also reiterate here, that it's critical to add here that Bandung was also the litmus test about whether this unity and this convergence is going to remain or it's going to break. And this is where you see that as far as both India and China were concerned, I think for the first time the Bandung Conference exposes to the regional players the kind of leadership that either India or China could actually contribute. And from 1962 onwards, when the Sino-Indian War takes place, you see a rapid deterioration of relations not just with China, but you also see the split that he spoke about in terms of India's relations with Indonesia. And during the 1965 war with Pakistan was also mentioned. There was this sense that if you look at the bilateralism between the two countries, I think it took a deeper plunge at this time. The strain in relations and the support given to Pakistan was actually something that India was not expecting. And there is an interesting, write-up that is there in one of the articles that have come out, that the potential of an India-China Pakistan nexus was something that was quite a concern to India at that point in time. Now this moves us into what I would say the second phase of the 15 years, which is from about 1965 to 80. Now, in the aftermath of the coup that happens under General Suharto, you see that the question of Asian relations actually takes a backseat because there is one clear difference at this point. The region began to face the stresses of the ideological divisions that were there across the Southeast Asian region, because this is at the height of the Cold War as far as Southeast Asia is concerned. So, considering the impact that this was having, both India and Indonesia had their own areas of focus. The question was not merely about furthering bilateral ties, but the question was also about how do you manage the regional environment in the context of your bilateral relationships. And this is where I think for almost, you see a very clear distinction that Indonesia actually offers, because by that time, Indonesia within the United Nations also gives recognition to India's entire focus on what was happening in Jammu and Kashmir. And this is where when India's recognition comes from Indonesia, at the same time, there is a very different domestic parallel shaping Indonesia, because this is when the Irian Jaya conflict was at its height. So the question of, incomplete processes of decolonization, the question of territorial issues that each country was facing as a result of that decolonization process was actually coming to a state of sort of understanding between the two. That in the context of how international law determines that, the possessions that were handed down from the colonial powers have to be acknowledged as it is, that is exactly where this incredible shift in recognition actually happens. For me, that phase of nation, I would actually say this is the nation building phase, because for both countries, this context was extremely critical. And this is when we look at the emergence, for example, of the non-aligned movement as a byproduct of this position, I think you see that the context of convergence was visible on issues, especially with regard to domestic politics, with regard to how you look at the Indian Ocean, for example, when the ASEAN region put forward its vision of a zone of peace, neutrality, freedom, and neutrality. You see that by then the context of the Indian Ocean's relevance around us and the zone of peace within the Indian Ocean was also taking shape from the Indian context. So there are major areas of convergence that you actually have, even though bilateral relations may not have been extremely well coordinated at this point. And this is the understanding, to my mind, that becomes extremely critical. The third phase, I would say, is from about 1980 to about 1995, because this phase, again, is in the second half of the Cold War. And when you're coming to an end of the Cold War by the early 1990s, I would say that this phase was extremely critical. Because you see that throughout 1980 was significant, because when India gives, I think Ambassador Gurjeet mentioned the Kampuchean conflict in his presentation. The context of where Cambodia and India's recognition was given to the Heng Samrin government was actually a setback, because at that point in time, the ASEAN was looking towards, re-looking, I would say, towards India in terms of where do we stand vis-a-vis the entire dynamics that were shaping Southeast Asian region. Now, at this point, I think we see that the movement towards, India's recognition of the Heng Samrin government actually is a setback, because ASEAN's entire focus, led by the Indonesian efforts to find a diplomatic resolution to that conflict, because this is very well articulated in Indonesia's responses, both in the joint informal meetings, one and the second joint informal meetings that it held as an option to resolve bring about a diplomatic resolution to the Cambodian crisis. And this context was very significant, because there is that immediate sense that there is a divergence of opinion of how Indonesia looks at it, because Indonesia, leading the ASEAN at that time, was focused on the non-interference principles in the most important way, in terms of not recognizing a foreign-backed government within Cambodia. Now, India's other preoccupation was our closer ties with the Soviet Union, the entire focus on where Vietnam stood vis-a-vis, and the fact that we had to give recognition at around the early 80s, when we gave it to the Cambodian government. This context of shift, I think, is very important, because by the end of that 89, 90s, when the collapse of the Soviet Union happens, you see this shift again taking place, when we are looking not just at going back to the going towards a look east policy rather, and also trying to engage greater with the bilateral level interactions with all the countries of Southeast Asia. Now, interestingly, this period was also a period of distinct and profound shifts for Indonesia. Ambassador Saran mentioned that he was there during that, the transition phase to democracy. I think by 1999, when the democratic transition with the collapse of the Suharto regime occurs in 98, and the transition to democracy takes shape, at the domestic level, the implications for Indonesia were so profound that the preoccupation was certainly more on internal matters and did not really expand to what was happening externally. But there is, I recall, a very interesting meeting that took place when around early 2000 and 2001, when former Foreign Minister Ali Alatas had come to India. And I was at that time researcher I had not joined the JNU, but I was still with the Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, IDSA. And behind a closed door meeting, what became very interesting for us to, as young scholars, to watch was this entire approach that Indonesia was suddenly taking in terms of understanding modalities of democratic shift, and how India could sort of contribute towards this kind of a democratic process. The move towards subsequent move that you see within the country towards the special autonomy laws, and how to manage conflicts within the country itself, were very interesting, because I remember Ambassador Saran mentioned that I was there in Indonesia for about a year with the CSIS. That was the most exciting phase, because you saw this transition of how the special autonomy laws were also factoring in some degree of local government, especially in the case of Aceh, because the local government law was passed in Aceh in 2006, and this sort of pushed the entire democratization process forward as far as the country was concerned. In the final phase, I would say, where I see certain very broad, interactions with Southeast Asia, the final phase is from, say, around 2010 to about the present, which is the fifth phase of the interaction. And if you see this bilateral interaction, this is when there is a significant move forward on our bilateral relations with each other. Because I think both the strategic partnership that was evolved in 2011, and later the 2018 comprehensive strategic partnership that came about as a result of the recommendations of the joint working group, I think these have been taken very, very seriously and formally between the two countries. Now, where I think there are 2 or 3 critical, I would say, issues that have emerged, I think the first focus, would be on the question of maritime security, maritime diplomacy. I think the question of naval diplomacy has already been mentioned, and there is a separate panel on maritime issues, so I will not go into too much detail there. But I think the one thing that came out is the joint statement on maritime issues that came out during Prime Minister's visit in May of 2018. And I think this joint statement on the importance of the maritime brings about convergences on three very, very critical aspects. That is the focus on international law, the respect for UNCLOS, and the normative order that the two countries have been relentlessly stressing as far as this Indo-Pacific region is concerned. Now, if you have to look at a deeper impact, I think the context of where our role, the potential role that India has in developing the port in Sabang, Indonesia has constantly been diversifying its investments. And the context that India could have a significant role to play in developing this port of Sabang, and where the trust factor comes in this particular case, I think that's a very, very, I would say it's a foundational context where you can sort of build further on. The question of the AOIP has actually been taken solely by Indonesia forward to the ASEAN region. Had it not been for Indonesia's efforts to bring the AOIP to the table, the question on an outlook would not be there for the Indo-Pacific. And this has been a solely ASEAN perspective. And I think this is where the context of Indonesian leadership within the region systematically comes to the forefront, because you see that effort to take new initiatives into the ASEAN dynamics and deliver in the context of some kind of a document. And while this is a living document, I remember Pak Siswo Pramono calling this a living document as far as the region is concerned. He says that this is a document that is constantly going to be subject to change, subject to re-evaluation, and subject to newer ideas as we work towards maintaining some kind of options for the region. And it is here that both the AOIP, the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, also come as critical areas for both countries to explore their bilateral ties. I think I'll stop with this because we've covered 10 minutes, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shankari, for that very cogent kind of survey of the more recent historical perspective of relations of the two countries. There have been, of course, areas where there have been perhaps differences between the two countries. You mentioned Kampuchea. I would only like to say that, from what I remember of India's position, it was not just a Cold War kind of a divide taking either the Western, stand or the stand of the then Soviet Union. There was a great deal of worry in India about the slaughter which was taking place. And I think in some conversations I remember having with Ali Alatas, he said that this was something, although ASEAN had taken a certain position on Kampuchea, he said that even he personally was very rather disturbed by having to be seen as standing together with a regime which was literally a genocidal regime. But I think it is perhaps very worthwhile to note that one good result of the end of the Cold War and the tremendous changes which took place in India itself. Many people forget that the end of the Cold War was a very traumatic experience for India. A strategic partnership with the Soviet Union, which had lasted from literally for 30 years, from 1960 to 1990, overnight evaporated. Even in terms of our economic and trade relations, we had the rupee payment trade with the Soviet Union and the other, socialist countries. Several of India's exports could only go to those countries. There were no other markets. That suddenly overnight disappeared. Also in India itself, it was a time of great danger in a sense because of the almost bankrupt state that India found itself in, rising oil prices. We had, only about 3 weeks of foreign exchange reserves left to cover three weeks of imports. So it was a very, very, very difficult period. And it is, I think, really we underestimate the kind of leadership that was provided at that time, which not only enabled us to get past that economic crisis, but something which became very important, India's low East policy. You know, and that is when the engagement, much deeper engagement with ASEAN countries began. And I remember a meeting that Prime Minister Narasimha Rao had with the then President Suharto, and in which President Suharto said to Narasimha Rao that, we have become strangers over the last so many years, and it is time for us to get to know each other again. That was really the impact of the Look East policy. So we have been through lots of ups and downs, but I think today the relationship really has a very strong foundation, and I would like to again refer to something that Ibu Krishnamurthy has been talking about again and again, the importance of trust between the two countries. And I think what we are currently engaged in is precisely trying to develop that kind of a trust, so that even if there are differences between the two countries, that trust factor enables us to overcome some of those differences. I think it is very important that Indonesia has talked about itself as the maritime fulcrum, in this part of the world. And I think that is legitimately so. But that also reflects the fact that Indonesia, as an archipelago country, I think there are several thousand islands.
Several thousand.
Yeah. Which are spread over such a wide, ocean space, and that can be a huge challenge. I mean, even managing our own Andaman and Nicobars is a challenge, so I can imagine how much of a challenge it would be. So in that context, the strong cooperation that we have established in the maritime field, the fact that India and Indonesia today are sharing maritime domain awareness, which is so important both to us as well as to Indonesia. I think these are the factors which can bring about, over a period of time, a greater degree of trust. So thank you very much. So let me now turn to Dr. Akung Nurvijeo, who I think is joining us online.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Welcome to you, Dr. Nurvijeo. And let me introduce you. Akung Nurvijeo is a lecturer and the secretary of the undergraduate program in modern diplomacy. His expertise includes Indonesia's foreign policy, regional studies focusing on Middle East and Africa, South-South cooperation, and Turkish foreign policy. He holds a BA in international relations from Universitas Indonesia and an MSc in international relations from the Institute of Social Sciences, Gazi Üniversitesi, Turkey. Yeah. So I will now turn to you, Professor, for your remarks. If you could limit yourself to about 10 minutes or so. Yeah. Okay, sir. You have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador. Let me share screen first. Okay. First of all, thank you for inviting me to this forum, especially to CCR and RIS, and also my gratitude to Her Excellency Ibu Ina Krishnamurthy, Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to the Republic of India, and also His Excellency Mr. Sandip Chakraborty. And to be honest, it is an honor for me to have the opportunity to talk in this important dialogue forum. This forum, I think, this dialogue, important in order to enhance people-to-people context as the backbone in order to understanding what the relation between India and Indonesia. When Ambassador Samsharan mentioned that you already mesmerized, me too. I feel mesmerized, in understanding about the relations between India and Indonesia. And I think we start Indonesia and India, big brothers. Yeah. The So there are some reasons in my presentation here about these things. The first one, we, Indonesia and India, already shared religious heritage. Yeah. The influence of Hinduism and Buddhism is evident in both countries, with temples, festivals, and traditions being shared. Yeah, I come from Magelang in Central Java, and one of the biggest temple, yeah, the world largest Buddhist temple. The name is Borobudur complex, built there, yeah, as a shared religious heritage. Also in Prambanan in Yogyakarta in Indonesia, built in 10th century, yeah, by the Sanjay dynasty, as the evidence that we already have a shared religious heritage between Indonesia and India. And second one, we also have a linguistic similarities here. Certain words and expressions in both languages have roots in Sanskrit, yeah, highlighting historical connections. We also have cultural exchanges. We have regular cultural exchanges, art, music, dance, literature, and so on and so forth. And also, we already have actively, Indonesia and India actively engaged in global issues based on value based, also by the interest, yeah, solidarity, peace, freedom. Yeah. Both countries are actively participating in its efforts for peace and development. Also have aspiration in order to fostering collaborations in regional security, economic integrations, addressing global challenges, and so on and so forth. And also, we cannot neglect that the importance of the people to the people to people ties. Yeah, it's significant. Indian diaspora in here. There's a lot of Indian diaspora in Indonesia, and also it's deep rooted in the cultural, social, arts that bridging in, yeah, in the historical approach in understanding the relation between India and Indonesia. Now, and then, in order to understanding the pattern between Indonesia and India, I'm trying to make such a periodization of Indonesia-India relations. Three main events. Early relation period, the pre-independence connections, and the second one period, decolonization and building spirit of solidarity. And the last one, post-Cold War until now. And because the relation between the two was built long before they become independent. Yeah. And this periodization is based on the main things to know about the foreign policy analysis, about domestic factor, international factor, and also the leadership. And let's start with the first one, early relations, pre-independence connection. I think Ambassador Gurjit and Professor Shankari already mentioned to us, and I really, to be honest, I really enjoy to listen and understanding about the speech. Yeah. In the early relations, pre-independence connections, I divided into three main events. They are ancient maritime trade, cultural influences, and religious connections. And about the ancient maritime trade, we understand that Indonesia, in the 5th century, came to Indonesia archipelago to trade gold, sandalwood, and spices, bringing culture and religion. And something also important, yeah. And the second one, cultural influences. Yeah, Indonesia absorbed cultural influences from India, evident in art, literature, and religion, enriching its own cultural tapestry. And also religious connections, the spread of Hinduism and Buddhism from India to Indonesia, left lasting until now. Those two connections between cultural and religious in evidence we can see in many parts of Indonesia. The evidence from the kingdom of Sriwijaya, kingdom of Mataram, and also heroic works of Ramayana and Mahabharata. And besides those cultural works like Ramayana and Mahabharata, other evidence can be seen until now. The inscription, the Kutai inscription on the seven pillar of stone, and also students from Borobudur Temple were sent to Nalanda Buddhist University in northern India at that time. And something also important that we need to also highlight the orientation of Indian traders looking far away to the east. Some of the scholars argue that the journey to the east was more due to the demand for spices from the Roman Empire. Yeah. So the trade was carried out to Malaysia, Java, Sumatra, Cambodia, and also Borneo. So the relation began with trade, extending to the expansion of influence on social, cultural, religious, and political statecraft aspect. And something also important in this relation, in this early relation, pre-independence connections, were entering the era of colonization, a high interest from colonialists to settle and establish control over the indigenous people of an area. And this condition, both nations, India and Indonesia, faced colonizations. India under British rule and Indonesia under Dutch Japan rule, yeah, leading to shared experience and struggles for independence. And these situations, the existence of Western colonizations, yeah, broke the direct link of our relationship between Indonesia and India. However, we already have the roots on Indian culture in many culture in the society in Indonesia. And the second period of decolonization and building spirit of solidarity. This is one of the important period in capturing relationship between the two. Yeah, this period has the baseline from all the relationship has been made by the two countries. Moreover, this periodization is having three main characteristics, I think. The first one, this period is support for independence. India itself, a newly independent nation, actively support Indonesia's struggle for freedom from Dutch colonialism. Some of the evidence we can see from the first aggression of Netherlands, Dutch in 1947, that leaders Nehru condemned the Dutch aggression by saying no European country, whatever it is, can place its troops in Asia against Asian nations. And India even banned Dutch flights from flying over India. And also another cases is about the Dutch military aggression. The second one in 1948, that India initiated a meeting of 18 nations regarding Indonesia in New Delhi on 20 January of 1947. And I think this is the first one, support for independence. And the second one, share ideals or common values. Both nations shared a commitment to self-determination and strong anti-colonial stance, uniting them a common cause. Yeah. There are three main milestones in here. The first one, Asian Relations Conference. Yeah, before ASEAN African Conference in 1955, that Indonesia and India championed the cause of newly independent nations in Africa and Asia and promoting their interest in the international arena. And I think this forum is used to promote the freedom of nations in Asia. And one of the delegation from Indonesia, Sultan Syahrir, and so Agus Salim, if I'm not mistaken. Syahrir ever said that Indonesia in recent years had played an important role in events in Asia and the world, and that Indonesian participation was very important for the conference in India. And then another milestone is Bandung Conference, 1955, that becomes the milestone in order to the part of the colonization era. And both nations, India and Indonesia, played pivotal roles in the Bandung Conference, fostering the spirit of non-alignment and solidarity among newly independent states. And I think, and the third one is non-alignment movement in 1961. And this period also have another characteristic. We have diplomatic recognition. India was among the first countries to recognize Indonesia's independence, solidifying their diplomatic ties and fostering mutual respect. And something important in this diplomatic recognition, we understand this relation is important. So those countries between the two, between India and Indonesia, we have Treaty of Friendship in 1951. And this treaty is determining a lasting peace and friendship that cannot be changed. And then the next one, we also see the strengthening. Yeah, we have economic cooperation, cultural exchange, even technical assistance. Yeah, technical assistance has been made at the time, and you can see on the right side there's some of the picture. The picture number one is about the Indian badge. Yeah, 20 Indonesian pilots who were trained in India and become the first batch of Garuda pilots. And picture number two, this is the consignment of medical aid and textiles from India arrives in Yogyakarta. And picture number three, this is the first shipment of rice from Indonesia arrives at Cochin Port, India in 1955, 1945, sorry. So it shows that the bilateral cooperations is really strong at that time. Yeah. And then the decolonization, periodization, and development. And post-Sukarno era, we started the revitalization of India-Indonesia relations. Yeah, because Indonesia, however, faces the domestic dynamics that influence the direction of its foreign policy. Yeah, Indonesia under Suharto is directed at the domestic improvement, good neighborhood politics, and so on and so forth. And in this situation, we're trying to revitalization the relation with India. And one of the milestone is the visit of Adam Malik, yeah, to India. And before that happened, Adam Malik also talked in the parliament, and he said that especially regarding India, the government intends to smooth relation with India and review Indonesia relation with that country. We must not forget that India is one of the important countries in the international politics, especially in Afro-Asian politics and non-alignment. And India welcomes this development. Yeah. Former Minister Swaran Singh said that he was pleased to note the efforts of the new Indonesian government to improve the relations with India. And after that, the improving relations are expressed and supported by regular exchange or visit by leaders and officials by the two countries. From 1966 until 1980s. Yeah. Yeah. Um, and then the next one, post-Cold War periodizations. And in here, we are increasingly close diplomatic relations that India as the destination for the state visit of the Indonesian president-elect. Yeah, start from Kiai Haji Abdul Rahman Wahid in 2000, and then after that, Indian Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee also visited Indonesia in 2001. Ibu Megawati visit India 2002, and then President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono visited India in 2005. And that time, in 2005, there was a strategic partnership agreement between Indonesia and India. And at that time also, we started with India initially to discuss about AIFTA, ASEAN-Indian Free Trade Area. And this period was complemented by institutional strengthening of India-Indonesia's cooperation. Yeah, strategic partnership in 2005, establishment of the AIFTA in 2008, new strategic partnership in 2011, and also 2018 comprehensive strategic partnership. And I think I agree with Professor Shankari that after 2011, 2014, 13 and 14, the relation between the two is much more stronger, yeah, because we already have the baseline from the so deep rooted in our history and also our interests and so on and so forth. And then there are some challenges and opportunities between relation between India and Indonesia. Yeah, the first one, maintaining stability in the region. Yeah, both nations share a common interest in maintaining peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region. And through ASEAN cooperation, also India is actively engaged with ASEAN, including Indonesia, in order to enhance regional economic and security cooperation, promoting economic growth, addressing climate change and environmental issues. Yeah, and there's a lot of opportunities collaborating on maritime security and counterterrorism efforts, strengthening trade and investment, cooperating on renewable energy, and also something that we cannot forget, increasing people-to-people connections. And the last one, contemporary Indonesian-Indian partnership, priorities and future outlook. I think we have to see and much more focus on four things. That the first one, multi-level and multi-actor strategic partnership. Yeah, because strengthening partnership is something important, and sustaining and deepening bilateral ties is crucial for mutual prosperity and regional stability. The second one, expanding economic collaboration. Yeah, because both countries actively exploring ways to enhance economic cooperation, trade, investment, infrastructure, also digital economy, yeah, with global cooperation plus empowering social cooperation, because Indonesia and India increasingly collaborating already collaborate on certain global issues. Yeah. And also people to people exchange, enhancing cultural and academic exchange will foster deeper understanding and friendship. So India and Indonesia have an inclusive and stable relation, I think, and relation between the two are influenced by domestic, international, and leadership factors. Changes in periodization do not completely break the ties between Indonesia and India. India influence is great in Indonesian society. In many aspects of Indian culture are in literature, arts, music, foods, and so on and so forth. And change is something normal, but so many similarities that we already have that drives us to work hard hand in hand with between India and Indonesia in the name of solidarity. I think that's all, Ambassador Shamsaran, from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this very comprehensive sort of survey of India-Indonesia relations since the early days right up to the present, and you have also given us a sense of what are the kind of areas we should focus on in the future. Thank you very much. We are running out of time, but I have a last speaker who's also online, and that is Emil Radhyansya, right? Who will be giving the last presentation. He has been majored in international relations. His thesis was on the rise of new social movement and its implication. This was for Bolivia. He has been in the undergraduate program at the Universitas Budi Luhur. He has also been, has done a course in Japanese language, German, English. Uh, Welcome to you. And you now have the floor, sir, to speak about the historical survey of India-Indonesia relations. And since we are running out of time, I would request you to please keep your presentation short. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I hope my voice could hear clearly in the room. Okay. Also, I would like to greet Your Excellency Ambassador Ina Krishnamurti, who is already with us since in the morning, of course, in the New Delhi time. And also I can see my colleague from CCS, Pak Arisman, and also Mas Broto from Indonesian University. So let me share my presentations. So we could sorry, it seems that I cannot share my presentation. But Mr. Moderator, I would like to say that I am, there you are. Thank you for showing my presentation. For information, I'm a third generation of Indian descent actually in Indonesia. My grandfather was an Indian. He was a Sikh at the time before he converted into Islam. So as in start from the morning, we already hear the information about the historical relations between India and Indonesia. And of course, that Mr. Moderator already mentioned about the Kuch Hotahe, which was very popular among us in the late of 1990s. already watched the movies for one more than 5 times. So it's just for me to watch the movies again and again. So what the previous speaker already told us about the Indonesian and India relations since from the beginning of the relation itself. In here 2024, we have reached 75 years of relations, which start from the beginning of Indonesia independence. And if we see back that the relation between the two countries actually is more than 75 years, but it's already start from the connection between the traders from India to Indonesia. And the support for in India for Indonesian independence, it's it has been a big favor for us in where we could see ourselves right now. Indonesia as an independent state. So, what could we what could we gain from the information? Actually, that it makes us in the same page. Actually, because of the spread of the Indian belief system, culture, the religions to the Indonesian people at the time. Since we are still known by the Nusantara archipelago and now become the state, and of course we in Indonesia would like to find out more actually about the support of India to Indonesia in the our national development and also in the international forum. So I can from the previous and um, cultural heritage in which the of India is undeniably
This next presentation next.
We are not able to hear you, Emil.
Yeah, we are. Please show to the last slide of mine. The third is in the geopolitics and
Last slide,
security,
please.
in which last slide, yeah, please.
Last.
Because the previous slide is already explained by the other speaker. No, no. Before conclusion.
Before conclusion. This page.
Yeah.
Page.
The slide before
Yeah.
this.
Before conclusion, please.
Yeah,
Yeah.
looking ahead.
Yeah. Looking ahead. Yes. Looking ahead.
Sure.
So the third point that in the geopolitics and security, India and Indonesia have a strategic role in the Asian region. Both want the creation of a stable and safe area. The history of collective resistance to colonialism in the past have proven to be successful, so that it can be the basis for us to collaborate in the creation of the regional security. Of course, the issue of the Indo-Pacific, in which there is an issue between China and the rest of the claimant state, and also the rest of the Western power, in which India also in the side of the Western in the quadrilateral group meeting. And this is the problem that faced by all the participants in the area, in which all the participants would like to create a peaceful engagement with China, but also do not want that China become more dominant in the area. And India has also concern about it. And the fourth point that about the diplomacy and the global forums, in which Indonesia and Indonesia international cooperation in the non-alignment movement and the Asian African countries conference shows that there is a shared commitment in advocating for global issues, both in terms of security, climate change, SDGs, and others need to be continued in the other international forums such as the G20, the FATF, and together with ASEAN, which ultimately direct the two countries to jointly respond to the global issues. So without further ado to my slide, that actually what we need in this forum is to how we could make us, the both country, Indonesia and India, not only from the view of the state, but also from the view of the nation and its people, in which Mas Agung lebih jauh already said about the ties between people need to be strengthened. We need to understand between each other in the field of culture, in the field of politics, in the field of the problem itself between both countries. We know that the information, the negative information from India on the clash between the identity between the Hinduism, Hindu people and the Muslim people in India, which made a negative view from the Indonesian people, in which they think that how could India become such a rude country where the clash between identity is becoming more hidden over the time, and also that the negative information on the criminal, the increasing criminal in India to the foreign tourists. It makes a bad judgment for the Indonesian people to India. The question is, does Indian people really do that or did that? Because when we see the movie, it seems very beautiful. The interaction between people was so create so harmoniously and so on and so on. So I would like to propose on the how to make Indonesia and India in the one page once again, in which that we could work cooperatively in the side of politics, economic, and culture development. So I think we need a dialogue forum, not only limited in such as this forum, but also we could maybe both of government could create a program between peoples, Indonesia and India, in which we could know more about the development in India, the India identity itself, and also for the Indian people to know more on the Indonesian people. Of course, there is a scholarship given by the Indian government to Indonesian students to study in the Indian university. It is good, but we need more than that. We need more engagement between people. So in the future, I said we because we need to create one identity between Indian and the Indonesian people, in which we could proudly say that we are brothers and sisters in one interest, either to create a harmonious interaction between us, and also to create a strong to create a power to create a one um, one goals that we could push together, that so that the international community could accept what is actually we need in the Asia. Sometimes we in Asia was controlled by the Western to uh, to 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 do what they want us to do, but not as what we want to do. So I think that's all to shorten this
Thank
presentation,
you.
Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much. You have been very kind and generous. I apologize for cutting short your presentation, but you have quite rightly stressed the importance of people to people's ties and greater engagement, and I think that is something that we must work on. Let me now turn to Ambassador Krishnamurthy, who would like to say a few deliver a few concluding
Yes.
remarks, and then we will break for
Actually, it's
tea.
not concluding, but I have to leave. Unfortunately, I cannot be with you until end of the dialogue. I just want to. I thank you for some people who said that mesmerizing with our past, but if I can imaging the relationship a car where we are all the drivers. The rear mirror is our past. The past, we experience accidents. We're bleeding because of many things. But the rear mirrors, it needs to stay as rear mirrors because we need to look ahead. And I do understand that my Indonesian friends, but I thank you, Pa Emil, to say one of the most sensitive issues, which is social, cultural related issues. It's very deep inside all of us. And that needs to be addressed. If there is no trust, there is no confidence. If there is no confidence, there is no flourishment of relationship. So again, thank you all. Ambassador Saran, it's such an honor to sit beside you. And you need not to mention about Ambassador Gurjit. He's number one critics of our relationship. So it's truly an honor for me to be here. But please do remember, I don't like the past, but I think if we want to look ahead, we really need to put the past in the rear mirror, because if not, then we will have the same accidents in the past, which is up until now we still feel the bleeding. The sweat of our founding fathers will not be matter. So we need to look at the future. That's the number one lesson that I have learned from Indian people, Indian friends during my post more than 2.5 years. So thank you again for this. Thank you again to all of the speakers, and I wish you a very fruitful deliberation. And I wish my Indonesian friends be more upfront to the most sensitive issues, because we need to understand and the most important thing, how to understand the solution of it. We cannot find the band-aid for history. Cannot. There is no way. But how to make a man out of it, Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Ambassador Krishnamurthy, for those very wise words at the conclusion of our session. I'm sorry that we simply do not have time for any question and answer session. So it remains for me to thank each one of our very distinguished panelists for the excellent presentations that were made by them, both by our Indian panelists, Ambassador Gurjeet, and also Professor Shankari, and also our two online guests who have been with us, Akung Nurvijio and Emil. Thank you very much for all your presentations, and I wish this seminar great success. And thanks to Praveer De, director of the ASEAN India Center, for hosting us this morning.
Thank you very much for your chairing the session. So we break for 5 minutes. 5 minutes coffee break, tea break. And please, coffee is served outside. Bring your coffee here. We have to start the next session. Thank you very much.
Hope we'll see you sometime.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
You need to check on that.
Terima kasih Mas Agung. Sampai ketemu.
Terima kasih, Bill.